Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is The King of Dungeons by Baz Stevens. Okay, first a bit of history. Successfully kickstarted and released in 2019, King of Dungeons is a 136-page, self-contained, full gaming system built around the premise that adventuring is an actual career choice and that adventurers are members of guilds that accept dungeoneering charters from clients to perform tasks. It's worth pointing out that this review copy I was sent is not representative of the standard product, as that is a normal A4 book. It is available in both soft and hardback. Right to the cover. Here we have a fairly decent and effective piece by Daniel Comerci depicting an adventurer torch in hand going about their business. Definitely par for the course. Okay, to the inside. Beyond the plethora of art credits, we have a Readme first section where the author talks about his inspiration behind the concept of King of Dungeons, which is built on the chassis of the 13th Age role-playing game, as well as a blend of other games that have been stripped back and bolted on. It is designed to be very adventurer-centric and has a definite old-school feel, where it is less about crunchy rules and more about loose, flexible outcomes. The question, what happens if I get stuck, is posed, with the author assuring you that you really won't and just make something up, but if push comes to shove, to contact them via email or social media. A very positive approach. It even talks about why the decision was made to call it King of Dungeons, with the reason being that Baz, and his friend Gaz, had always talked about how cool it would be to be a king, and in this game the GM/DM is known as the King, and the King of Dungeons is something you can actually aspire to. More on that later. Following this we have a little story and then a nomenclature section detailing the different terms that King of Dungeons uses and demonstrates their interchangeability. For example, cantrip equals trick and turn equals go, and after this is a list of inspirations including games, fiction, people and playtesters. Then we come to the key concept of King of Dungeons. The basic premise is that the adventurers are in a classic fantasy setting as part of an adventuring band known, going forward, as a guild. The idea is that the events of the world are alluded to and that there are no timeline or nations or lists of gods. It has essentially been designed to slot into whatever gaming world you and your group enjoy, or you write the setting as you go along. In fact, the author jokes that somebody once asked him what the name of the world was and he came up with the name Generica. Alignments are completely mutable too, noting that some will never even come into play. Then it moves into guilds. Adventurers are a very visible part of society and considered a professional class and viable career choice that can earn you a living. They're generally considered to be celebrities to the common people, and the better you are, the more attention you attract. It's a very risky, lucrative career, and those that are skilled and or lucky can do well. Like in the big business world, smaller guilds are bought up or muscled out by bigger ones that are more powerful and with richer patrons, with many falling by the wayside or quietly fading away. After this are the charters. These are essentially the paying quests that guilds take on. This can be anything from suppressing bandit uprisings to unearthing and clearing out an evil temple. It is the daily bread and butter of adventurers. Guilds are a mutable thing with inside and outside forces pushing and pulling them in different directions, which can be dangerous and intriguing in equal measure. We then have campaigns. This usually has small beginnings and blossoms into the guild becoming serious business, with enmities and grudges interfering with charters at the worst moment. There's a character sheet fully annotated with the page references of where the relevant information is in the book, which is a great little touch. So next we have the all-important section called Roll Up, Roll Up. This is where we deal with creating adventurers. We have a handy quick reference which gives you the order in which you should begin to create a character. The first thing is to pick a culture, or more commonly race. There are 6 options, each with their own twist: human, dwarf, elf, goblin, diabolic and draconic. And each has a cultural twist such as godless, feared and disrupted and militaristic. This makes for some interesting combinations. Each race is described in the most fundamental terms and a comparison is made. For example, humans are described as being adventurous, versatile and petty, getting everywhere and are compared to insects. And infernal are described as demonic, wily and quixotic, with violet irises and a grudge-based agenda, like children. It does pose the option of being a human-centric society, with the cultural backgrounds being representative of where they are from. For example, draconic could mean desert-dwelling nomads. After this we have class. There are 6 classes in King of Dungeons. Warrior, your typical armour-clad weapons experts. Rogue, backstabbing stealthy types. Priest, undead-slaying healers. Mage, wielders of destructive and mind-bending magic. Scholar, insightful bearers of knowledge and intrepid explorers. And Commander, warrior leaders who command the battlefield. Think something along the lines of the Warlord from D&D 4th edition. Each class and race has a game stat associated with it. Strength with warriors and infernals, dex with rogues and goblins, con with scholars and dwarves, int with mages and elves, wisdom with priests and draconics, and charisma with commanders and humans. Each stat is measured on a scale of +0 to +5. The player should assign these bonuses amongst the stats as they see fit, and these numbers raise with experience. These are used as a base modifier for dice rolls. The game also encourages the player to think up an adjective to describe their stat rather than a bonus. For example, a +4 strength may be described by the player as being ripped, and similarly a +0 dex could describe themselves as butterfingered. It then moves on to alignment. In King of Dungeons, it is used to represent a character's beliefs, goals and drives, etc. And players are encouraged to examine their alignment when faced with an in-game conundrum. It gives a different take on what you could be considered the conventional alignment system, with 6 representations. Civilization, i.e. one based around law and order. Gods, a theoretical belief system. Magic, i.e. a love of unlocking the secrets of the universe. Nature, a neutral-esque belief that is centered around the natural world. Savagery, essentially might makes right. And thievery, which is simply... There are also 3 dark path alignments. Diabolic, i.e. demons and devils. Undeath, which celebrates the glory of entropy. And villainy, that of schemers that have a plan that you're not going to like. He then goes on to talk about how these alignments could fit into your world, and then it moves on to expertise. Basically, your character gets expertise in 5 areas, with 3 that should usually be tied to your character class, and 2 wildcard areas that are tied to your character's backstory. The expertise dice goes up as the characters advance in level. King of Dungeons has essentially 3 tiers of play. Adventurer, which is levels 1 to 3, Conqueror, which is levels 4 to 7, and King, which is levels 8 to 10. Hit points are determined by your base number here, which you add your con modifier and multiply by 3. Your defences are the now bog standard Fortitude, Reflex and Will, which are based on your stats and class, and adventurers also have a number of recovery dice, that being 8, to help them heal in between combats, with warriors getting an extra one, and with mages getting d6 hit points with each recovery, the rest getting d8s and warriors getting d10s. We then get into the interesting subject of wealth. For adventurers, this is defined in 3 ways: kit, i.e. their possessions, coin, meaning cash at hand, and lifestyle, which is fairly self-explanatory. These are demonstrated in this table. You get to choose one to be advantaged in, 1 regular and 1 disadvantaged, which can make for some fun combinations. We then move to some standard backpacks which are based on culture, race, alignment and expertise, with the more nasty ones at the bottom. These are to help flesh out the adventurer. Next we move on to guilds themselves, with it giving us multiple tables to roll on to determine everything from the concept behind them, what their guild house is like, and the pub they hang around in. Pubs play a very vital role in King of Dungeons. More on that later. Additionally, your guild should have an alignment. We then move on to the all-important section on classes. There are some fast and loose rules about who can use armour and weapons, as well as what ones they can actually realistically use, and then we move on to the first class, Warrior. It's worth mentioning that each of the classes has one of these intro pages with a little tail on them to add flavour, which they really do. All of the classes have abilities, i.e. something that they can do that others can't. Talents, of which they start with 2 and get a 3rd to 4th level and a 4th to 8th level, and exploits are things you can choose to do with your talent. The warrior talent are things like Cleave, whereby you can make a free attack once per combat once you drop a foe. Deadeye, which causes your ranged attacks to crit on a 19+, and you use 1 dice size higher for damage, and Power Attack, which allows you to deal d6 per level damage extra on an attack once per combat after you've hit. Anyone familiar with 3rd edition D&D's feats will get the idea. Each exploit or named variation has 5 circles of power magnitude, of which access to these are granted on odd numbered levels. All of these exploits are triggered by an action or event. For example, Brace for It has a trigger of any miss, which means until your next go, any crit taken becomes a normal hit instead. Or Sword of Destiny, which is triggered on a natural 20, which means you can use a free recovery. You get the idea. Rogues are next. These are, as you would expect, nasty backstabbers with dex-based abilities that can evade and use deadly strikes in equal measure. Their exploits are called schemes, and they're all based around what makes a rogue deadly in combat. Priests are next. They have some interesting abilities. They can perform prayers, and if they take confession, they can deliver more power to an individual, or if they perform a sermon, they spread the power about at a lesser extent to more people. They have advantages around the use of recoveries and are, as you may imagine, based around healing and ritual magic. Each priest can choose 3 domains, 2 greater and 1 lesser, and gain the benefits as listed here. Their exploits are called prayers, and many of them can be cast as circles of higher levels to more powerful effect. They have at-will powers and battle prayers which are used once per combat. An interesting spell to talk about here is Resurrection, which can only be used once per level and a limited number of times in a priest's lifetime, with the 5th casting killing the priest outright and only having a 50% chance of working either way. It's certainly not something to cast willy-nilly. Following this we have the Mage. Their abilities are based around cantrips or tricks as they're known, and are the usual fare of minor powers such as light and alarm. Wizards know all spells, but can only memorise an amount of them each day. Their talents are centred around things like extra memorisation and having a familiar. They have utility spells and circle spells. Utilities are non-combat fares that can be memorised and cast at higher levels for greater effect, and circle spells are the kind of things you would expect, such as magic missile, invisibility and fireball. Next we come to the scholar. The best way to describe them is bardic know-it-alls whose brain is always working overtime. Their skills are insights, which they use to aid their allies, theorems, which are rambling commentaries that carry power, and esoterica, which is the use of obscure knowledge to conjure spell-like effects. Their talents are interesting. They have things like During the War, where you regale your guild with war stories to get an extra alignment of your choice, and That Reminds Me, which can give a guild roll advantage on an expertise dice for an alignment. Their insights, theorem and esoterica, are a strange hybrid of bard, enchanter, and 4th edition D&D warlord. They sound a bit crazy but look incredible fun to play. They have powers like Stay With It, that when triggered can replenish a nearby ally's once per combat or daily ability, and Theory of Vigour, which grants temporary hit points to you or an ally. After this we have the Commander. These use command points that trigger in battle. Command points can be spent to activate the commands and tactics. Their powers. They are wily battlefield leaders who can, for example, use the Charge command to allow an ally a double move and still attack, or You Know What to Do, which allows an ally to take an extra action this turn. The next section is entitled Party Hard. Here it goes into the guild. It stresses the importance of two specific places, the guild house and the pub. The guild house is the HQ where all of the guild's paperwork or scroll work is done, and notes your place of employment, stores your trophies, and is somewhere to stay. These are highly defended places, and evil rival guilds would treat these as sacrosanct. The pub, on the other hand, is a place to relax with familiar surroundings, and is the default destination post-charter. It also stresses the requirement that players help populate the pub. It touches briefly on contacts and rivals, and then goes into resources. It discusses the importance of the likes of archives, arms and armour, maps and documents, retainers and even livestock. Magical loot or artefacts are the biggest prizes for dungeon delvers, as this has the biggest value and are the most dangerous things to carry around. It then goes into healing potions. In the King of Dungeons, the amount of healing you recover is based upon your tier, with the higher level tiers getting the most out of them. It even covers overdosing on them, becoming addicted to them, and then even recovering from addiction. We then move on to rules to live and die by, essentially the crunch of the matter. The normal check is a d20 modified by stats and possibly other sources. Criticals are a natural 20 and fumbles are a natural 1. Saves are done on a d6 with a hard being a 6+, a normal being a 4+, and an easy being 2+. Adventurers also have areas of expertise. These are dice that you roll to add to your check, and the size of the dice is dependent on your tier. 2 different areas of expertise that are synergetic bump up the size of the dice by 1, 3 bump it up a second time, etc. Advantage and disadvantage are the usual roll d20 and pick either the worst or the best, dependent on the situation. The DM or king sets the difficulty of tasks with target numbers. 15 for adventurers, 20 for conquerors and 25 for kings. It also covers not even bothering to roll dice if the outcome is plainly obvious, and there is even the concept of fail forward, which is outright failure during non-combat situations, which usually comes with a cost or consequence later on. The next thing we move on to is adventure time. It explains that there are 3 modes of play, with the default being adventure time, which is normal day-to-day stuff, combat time, which is how it passes in a fight, and guild time, for answering the call of guild business. Each of these has their own rules and playstyle. First up is adventure time. This covers the parts of the game where you're not fighting on a round-by-round basis, and are generally considered the default activity of the game. Players attempting something risky or with a degree of uncertainty may call for a check, and it's up to the king to determine whether advantage or disadvantage are appropriate. Additionally, skills don't really have a place here beyond those gained from your expertise, culture, class or alignment. Next we have a section on exploring. The whole Torches in the Darkness aesthetic is something that is actively encouraged, and it's worth mentioning that none of the different races have night vision, which essentially puts everyone on a level playing field with regard to their perceptivity. It also talks about following the player narrative with regard to spotting hidden things and being generous for those that are thorough. Another thing that King of Dungeons encourages is flashbacks. This is to discourage the nitty-gritty of shopping for gear and the like, with the players narrating a flashback to a previous time to make the scene cool, should something need addressing. The example they give is the adventurers being locked in cells and needing to get out, with the priest narrating the notion that a previously known regional bishop may be able to help them out. Next, move on to guild checks. In the King of Dungeons, the guild gets its own character sheet, acting as a supporting member to the cast of its members. The guild sheet acts as a guide for things like group checks, the likes of perception, stealth, the things where everyone contributes. It makes the point that adventuring isn't about coins and more about reward versus risk. Picking pockets and the like are pointed out as not being the kind of thing that great fantasy protagonists usually do, and it's more about the goal and the reward. It briefly and comically touches upon encumbrance, stating that if you need strict rules with regard to this, to steal rules from another system. The next big thing that is encouraged is montages. The kind of thing you see in movies that demonstrate the passage of time that covers the likes of travel, training sequences, investigation, that kind of thing. These also have the potential to provide ammunition for flashback scenes. After this it moves on to rituals. These are essentially a regular spell that a mage or priest knows that is cast outside of combat. All of the parties should be involved in the casting through the use of mini montages, and upon a successful casting, the spell effect is boosted as detailed on each of the different spells' descriptions. We then have chases and extended challenges. It covers which stat rolls should cover whatever challenge the adventurers come across, and it even covers fleeing from combat, which affects the reputation of the guild. It talks about camping, which can be partially based on montages, and if not done correctly can result in consequences, and then we shift to combat time. Initiative is done in 3 steps. The first round is a wisdom check, the second a dex check, and the third a con check. The idea behind this is those with a high wisdom will react to a situation better by reading it. Then it's based on quickness, and then it's based on sheer stamina. It goes into the time and motion of a round, stressing that skills should be used freely, and you should be able to do more than one thing in a turn, comparing it otherwise to a virtual drop-down menu. Creativity should be rewarded. It says to avoid the grid, stressing that this game works better with a more abstract concept about what is going on. The pros and cons of minis are discussed, and then we move on to the action economy. In King of Dungeons you can perform 1 major action and a minor action, or 2 plus a skill use per round. There are also free actions, which are self-explanatory, an interrupt action, which is one you can take when it's not your go, and an at-will action, which can be used all day every day if you wish. Similarly, daily actions are exactly as described. Movement is around 5 foot per point of speed you have. Distance is in 4 categories. In your face for right up close and grappling, at arm's length for those being wary, stone's throw, which is essentially in the same room, and shouting distance, which is from a position of relative safety. It also briefly discusses grappling here. We also cover dialogue. Witty banter between blows is actively encouraged so as to emulate how fights play out in the likes of comics, and to add a degree of excitement and fun. Also, players are encouraged to narrate the outcome of what they do in their go, and spice up their words to make it a fulfilling experience for everyone. It then goes on to common actions. First, close combat is resolved with attack versus strength versus the foe's fortitude to hit, and the damage is level times d6 plus strength. Using 2 weapons doesn't give you an extra attack, it simply allows you to re-roll a natural 2 on your primary weapon. Range combat is attack plus dex versus foe's reflex to hit, and damage is level times d6 plus dex. Magic uses a similar equation to hit, although the defense to hit is determined by the spell. A fumble is a natural 1, and that puts you at disadvantage for everything until your next turn. Manoeuvres that take advantage of the situation by clever players are actively encouraged, again to create a mood of excitement and tension. We also have the rally manoeuvre, which means you give up your major action and get a second wind to gain some hit points. You can continue to rally in combat, but each subsequent one means you have to pass an easy save, then a save, and then a hard save to do so. We then come to the Escalation Dice. At the beginning of the second round of combat, a big d6 is put down in front of everyone, and each subsequent round it goes up by 1. This acts as a positive modifier to their attack rolls and is designed to stop combats dragging on and becoming tedious. This also affects your fumble range, with the idea that tiring in combat forces mistakes. We then move on to getting hurt. Though the game uses hit points, these are not a numeric countdown of an adventurer's physicality. They're more a combination of many things, such as exhaustion, morale, trauma, bleeding, and sheer luck. We have the bloodied condition, which occurs when you're reduced to half hit points. This doesn't have any game effect beyond ramping up the narrative and letting the adventurers know that things have got serious. There are also the usual suspects, such as stunned, weakened, and the like, and have varying game effects. It also discusses the ramifications of breaking and fleeing, including how to wind down a fight at the end of combat time. We also have notes on being on death's door, scars, taking a breather, and having a proper rest. Following this, we have the third mode of play, guild time. This is essentially where the admin and so-called scroll work are performed, though this can take the form of a session in itself. It talks about group checks. This is a role for those times when the entire group needs to succeed at something, and this is stored on the guild character sheet. It's also possible for a player to have their expertise added to a group check if they can make an argument for it. There are also bonds. These are a pooled resource that starts at 0 and is added to every time a player rolls a natural 1 in combat. These can be cashed in at various stages in the game. Guild time also concerns itself with levelling up, with the adventurers getting +1 to each stat modifier, extra hit points, extra damage dice, and other powers, spells and abilities as per their class. It touches on assessment and appraisals, should this be something that the players want, and then moves on to the support crew. This is their contacts and staff that let the adventurers function the way they do. It gives us a table to roll random staff on here. Guild time also covers planning, which can take on the likes of non-charter independent work, and then touches on the likes of scroll work, networking, rival guilds, and using their wealth to achieve their ends. The next section is called The King of Dungeons. This is where the author offers some advice and guidance on how to run King of Dungeons. It talks about how the king uses the rules to run the game, whether that be using a single roll to resolve a situation or playing it out blow by blow, and talks about how to adjudicate them, giving a +1 boost wherever appropriate. It touches upon the lack of a setting for King of Dungeons, though this is not entirely true as we will see later, and makes the point that the game provides a framework for you to build a campaign around. The whole point is that the guild and charter system creates something where people go to adventure at a professional level, even though, as the author admits, it doesn't really hold together under close scrutiny, but that most fantasy systems don't either. It then moves on to two pieces that are in the setting, the Adventuring Party and the King of Dungeons. The Adventuring Party is a political group that embraces the notion that being a professional adventurer is a genuine career, and that over that period a series of rules and agreements called the Adventurers Code, or AC, have been formed. This is a constitutional document that every guild respects absolutely, theoretically. There are laws based around the acquiring of treasure, respecting other guilds and the like, and failure to abide by these rules can result in sanction and retaliation from the Adventuring Party, which can lead to every member being declared an enemy to all other guilds. These laws can of course be interpreted in many ways, and they're slightly vague in presentation, but of course if that is something that the party wants to explore, then the guild will be aware of the risks. The next part is the King of Dungeons. The Adventuring Party sponsors an annual grand tournament, with the culmination being the award of the title King of Dungeons to the greatest and perhaps luckiest adventurer of the year. This grants the bonus of a leadership position in the Adventuring Party, which money can't buy. Every leader of the Adventuring Party is a former winner of King of Dungeons. It is considered the biggest night of the adventuring calendar, with many opportunities to network with influential people being a bonus of attending. After this we have a section on how to prepare charters for the game. It gives a really well put together structure for designing them and integrating them into the game from a slot 0 session, and the agenda of the charter, the agenda of the guild, and the personal agendas of the adventurers themselves. It talks about tying these three things together to help drive the narrative along. It also talks a little about managing the transition of time and how to pace the game. Following this we have a section on how guilds gain patrons, from the village elder needing something done cheap to the well-dressed broker on behalf of a secret benefactor. It talks about the importance of the pub in doing this, giving us a plethora of examples. It covers rival adventuring parties and how the authorities get involved should things go astray. We then have monstrous resources. This section focuses on the adversaries of the guild that the guilds can face. Each foe has a stat line, a short code used to run monsters in combat. It begins with using the tier that your adventurers are running at, and then ramping it up as the players advance in level. Each tier has 3 numbers listed, low, medium and high. Monster attacks focus on fortitude by default, spell attacks target will, and blasty type spells target reflex, and monsters deal set damage that is doubled on a crit. Additionally, foes use morale to see if they hang around in a fight. A roll is triggered under set circumstances listed here. Monsters have 5 general roles, with the acronym being claws: controller, lurker, artillery, wrecker, and soldier. There is also a minion level of foe that is dispatched with a single successful hit, elite that are double the strength that they would usually be, and solo, which is worth 3 foes. There is also the leader who can inspire mob saving throws. We have a few tweaks listed to adjust as required, and then we move on to foe attacks and kickers. Foes will usually have 2 named attacks, for example Screaming Axe or Psychic Blast, that does damage, and a kicker which is something a foe can do that is a special attack that the king narrates. It gives some good examples of these here, as well as listing some foe abilities to use. It then moves into the territory of rival guilds. These rivals get a starring role as antagonists in King of Dungeons, and the players should grow to love to hate them. These can also be built around the clause system. It then gives us some example rival guilds which are nicely written and full of character. They even include the Smart Party, which may sound familiar to those who know the author's roots. After this we have some reference parts for the rules, and a small afterwords from the author which wraps the whole thing up nicely. King of Dungeons is a very entertaining read, and is a game that knows that it isn't breaking any new ground, but wants smart enough to understand that it doesn't really have to. What you have here is a system designed to not stress you out about the minutiae of nickel and diming every facet of life in a fantasy setting, and it tries its best to get you to the fun bit as quickly as possible, which is a commendable attribute. I like the idea that at level 10 you essentially retire the character and start a new one, as I've found that the most enjoyable games I've experienced in the time I've been gaming are always the lower level ones, where you're still finding your feet, experimenting with your abilities and making new allies and powerful enemies. It also gives you the chance to try out different class and race combinations to see what they play like. The writing style is a pleasant conversational tone with witty asides that made me genuinely chuckle on a number of occasions, and the barely concealed Marillion references dotted about was something I picked up on that made me smile. It has a very English feel to it, which is unsurprising given the author, and all the way through it feels like not so much a game that you're learning from a book, but more like a friend who is explaining the system to you in a way that you can easily understand, so you can just get on with playing it. It is, of course, by no means a perfect game, but in all honesty, it simply doesn't try to be. It just tries to be fun, and I mean ultimately, isn't that what gaming is all about? King of Dungeons is something I could easily see played at conventions at varying levels because it's just so easy to get to grips with, and things like the Escalation Dice theoretically prevents combat from dragging out into a war of attrition, as happens far too often in my experience. There are some areas that I feel lack a bit of rules and clarification. For example, many of the spells don't have ranges listed, which I know is something I would struggle with as a player, and I don't feel that bonds are given a proper explanation, as they seem to turn something bad, i.e. a fumble, into something you can spend later on, which I didn't fully grasp. The art throughout is good at times, patchy at others, but something that I did like is the random placements of dungeon maps throughout that you can use on the odd occasion when you get stuck. The lack of a setting was something else that I felt a tad deflated about, but to be fair, you can easily deal with it, and the idea that you can drape the game over an existing setting is one that many will run with, as something that I could see working wonderfully with a setting that has similar tone like Monkey Blood Design's The Midlands. If you're after something with a degree of modern presentation, but with an old school heart, I think you'll love King of Dungeons. It's fairly cheap at £20 for the softback with a free PDF, and I'm confident you'll find it an enjoyable read, even if you never end up playing it, which is something I hope you do. I give it an 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, I've put some links below. Lastly, if you like what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon. Bud out.